All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Apprenticeship Illinois webinar. I'll be your moderator and technical support. My name is Antonio Gomez. I work for the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm happy to help. If you have any questions along the presentation, there will be a couple of Q&A portions, so feel free to raise your hand before you speak, and then we're happy to answer any questions. The webinar will also be offering closed captioning for accessibility, so feel free to enable that if you'd like to. We'll also be recording this webinar, so a recording of this will be available on apprenticeshipillinois.com within a couple of days of the conclusion of the presentation. Um, I am going to hand this off to Nate to get us started. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much, Antonio. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nate Carlson. I work with the Workforce Policy Lab out of Northern Illinois University. I'm here today presenting on behalf of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity as part of our Spring 2026 Apprenticeship Illinois webinar series. We're so glad to have you with us today. If you registered for the full series of these webinars, and if you haven't already, I would recommend doing so. You may have noticed that today's topic is a little bit unrelated to the others. Most of the webinars in this series are going to be our CoLab for Success webinars, where we're going to be working with a number of core workforce partners and showing off how we can really maximize the benefits of those relationships and strengthen our workforce ecosystem. But before we got to those important webinars, I really wanted to start with this session, in part because this has been very heavily requested by members of our apprenticeship specialist and apprenticeship intermediary cohorts. And so we thought this is a great way to kick things off for 2026 with our technical assistant and professional development. Because truthfully, when we come down to it, the apprenticeship templates that we'll look at selecting, identifying, and editing today are really the core of a registered apprenticeship program. And so if we can identify a worthwhile template, we know that we're number one, on the right path in terms of getting our program fully developed and registered, but also that we're expediting that process for any employers or business partners that we're working with. So before I jump into today's topic matter, I do want to just give a reminder about Apprenticeship Illinois. We are kind of the apprenticeship expansion brand for the state of Illinois, and we have a network of regional specialists throughout the state of Illinois who will conduct in-person and virtual outreach for apprenticeships through events and one-on-one employer consultations, both in person and online. Our apprenticeship specialists receive and pursue referrals received to our amazing website, apprenticeshipillinois.com. Please check it out if you have not already. We have a number of great resources for workforce partners, employers, career seekers as well, related to work-based learning. Our apprenticeship specialists notably work with employers to fully develop and register their programs from start to finish, and a large part of that is some of the work we'll be talking about today in today's presentation. And our apprenticeship specialists function as kind of a regional hub of information, helping connect businesses to intermediary partners and other applicable services. You can see a full list of our apprenticeship specialists in the geographic areas they cover at apprenticeshipillinois.com, clicking on the employers page. If you do not see a specialist mentioned for your region, congratulations/apologies. You get to work with me. My contact information is available there as well. So with no further ado, I like to remind folks that apprenticeships can be easy. I always say that apprenticeships are easy. It's the partnerships required to make them happen that are difficult. But in terms of registering and developing a program to register for the U.S. Department of Labor, we can really boil down the pieces of information we need to three easy pieces of information. We call them the three C's of registered apprenticeship. Those three C's are competencies, coursework, and compensation. And I want to break down what each of those mean. Again, this is probably review for many of you, but just because today we're kind of getting into the nitty-gritty, I thought good to start with a review. The first C is competencies. What skills should the apprentice have by the time they have completed their apprenticeship? What is the occupation they are training for? What do they need to know how to do by the time that the year or 2 year or 3 years plus is finished, so that they can be marked as an experienced worker, a journey worker, a competent worker? That's the first C, is competencies. The second C is coursework. What training, either in a classroom or a virtual environment, is going to supplement the apprentices on-the-job learning to help support their skills growth? Usually this comes from a community college or trade school partner. It also looks like customized training, online modules. It's going to be different based on the needs of the business and the occupation being trained for. But that's that second C is coursework. So we have competencies and then coursework. And the third C is compensation. How much is the apprentice going to be paid and how are they going to earn their wage increases? All apprenticeship programs, all registered apprenticeship programs, that is, are either time-based, in which apprentices earn their compensation increases by hitting thresholds of hours put into specific skill tasks, which is to say, the longer they're in the program, the more hours they spend honing their craft, their skill, they see their wage increase based on those time-based thresholds. That's a time-based program. We also have competency-based program, in which the apprentice kind of moves at their own pace as they gain the competencies as evaluated by their assigned on-the-job mentors. That's how they earn those wage increases. We also have hybridized programs in which it's a combination of two factors. So the apprentice may need to be in the position for 6 months and have 5 competencies signed off on, and they can get that $2 an hour raise. So what we see there is that throughout all of this, there's a whole lot of flexibility provided to the businesses, to our employer partners, in how they design and develop these programs. With each of these 3 C's, whether it's the competencies, the coursework, or the compensation, the business and their needs and the needs of the occupation they're training for are in the driver's seat. Now, today, we're going to focus mostly on the first of the 3 C's, competencies, because that's what comes into play when we're looking for an apprenticeship template. And I want to clarify what we talk about when we're using the phrase apprenticeship template, because there's lots of different jargon and technical terms with this, just like anything else in workforce or public sector or anything in general with policy. We have a technical term for the documents we'll be looking for today. We might call them a work process schedule. We have the actual title of the form as it exists when we're registering with DOL, which is the Appendix A, contains this information. Those of us who are, working in a registered apprenticeship and workforce specialists may call it a competency list or a competency template. And all of those are great and none of them are wrong. But when speaking with businesses, just to kind of reduce that jargon, I think a best practice is to refer to it simply as an apprenticeship template, because really that's what it is. It is a template for what can your program look like. And so what is it? And I want to run down what is the apprenticeship template? What does this document, which we'll see in just a few minutes, it's really just a Word doc. You're gonna say, wow, it does all those things, but it really does. It's really important. That's why today was so necessary for us. First and foremost, apprenticeship templates list the job competencies required to complete the program. They are the entirety of that first C. And remember, there's only 3, so it's got to be a pretty big piece. So every single skill that the apprentice is expected to have related to their occupation is laid out in these templates. This helps us establish what the end goals of training are. And this is really crucial. And we'll see further down the list in helping employers visualize their programs. One of the goals of outreach when we conduct outreach to businesses for registered apprenticeship program is taking apprenticeship from being a sort of abstract concept to making it tangible to something they can visualize being a successful workforce strategy for their organization. And so by having all of these competencies laid out, that makes it a lot easier for employers to go from, okay, yeah, we're going to train up some folks and they'll get where we need them to be, to, no, this is exactly X, Y, and Z, what I want these people to know how to do. And we have a framework and a pathway for getting there. Apprenticeship templates on like a systemic broad level help us standardize the occupational skill set for an occupation across multiple employers. So if you complete a registered HVAC technician apprenticeship in Illinois, an employer in Ohio or Florida or North Carolina or wherever can know what that means. They know the quality of the training is guaranteed by the standardization of those competencies, and they know that you're going to know what you say you know how to do. So really those templates are crucial for us in making sure that the value add of the credential and the experience for the apprentices is standardized across wherever they go. Apprenticeship templates provide a framework for apprenticeship training and evaluation. Obviously, a lot of that's going to come down to the mentor-apprentice relationship established by the employer. But having this template in place helps create a structure for doing so, whether it's helping them log those hours towards meeting their time-based competency thresholds, or whether it's completing the skill evaluations or one-on-one demonstrations that will help them get the mentor signing off on their competency-based wage threshold progression. In addition to that, these templates, if they're a physical copy, which all apprentices are required to receive a physical copy of their apprenticeship program standards, they allow for a real-time documentation of the program progress. So as we'll see when we actually look at the documents, they are literally like sign a date and get the initial next to each competency. So as the apprentice moves through the program, they're going to see this packet of empty boxes slowly fill up to the point where, oh my goodness, I know how to do that. I know how to do that. And so I think just visually, but also as a real-time indicator, that's super important. Apprenticeship templates as kind of a starting point for where we develop a program can help us determine what supplemental education or related technical instruction or classroom learning is going to be necessary based on what skills are going to get covered in the on-the-job training, and what if this is maybe a little more theoretical, a little better fitted for the classroom environment. One of the great things about registered apprenticeship programs is that they allow for a combination of theory and practice through that combination of on-the-job learning and classroom learning. And we can help determine what classroom learning is going to be the best fit for our program by taking a look at these competency templates, these apprenticeship templates. Apprenticeship templates also help us to bridge various systems of classification within workforce development. O*NET Online is a resource we'll be checking out here in just a bit. It crosswalks or references perfectly with the DOL apprenticeship database system. So if we look up an occupation on O*NET, we can directly connect it to DOL, and we'll demonstrate that in just a bit. We also utilize SOC codes, occupational codes, as well as a number of other training identifying numbers, and all of those kind of come together in this document so that we're not left to do all that legwork on our end to say, okay, does this correspond with that? It's all here. So these documents, although they're quite simple on the surface, end up doing quite a lot for us, not just in the process of developing and registering our program, but also in the day-to-day activities of the apprentices. So we never want to skate by this or breeze through this, because this is a crucial component of program development. So what is exactly in this document that we're going to be looking for, that we're going to spend time today learning how to identify? First and foremost, it has the occupation title and the occupation codes for the DOL system. It's worth noting that sponsors, the employers, the businesses who are taking charge of these programs can change the occupation titles from what's listed with DOL. That'll become important in just a bit. We have a section header for each kind of competency. They call those work activities, and then they break the specific competencies down into tasks, and those are listed alphabetically. In a competency-based program, there is a space for mentors to verify via their initials and date when those competencies were acquired by the apprentice. And in a time-based program, there is space for logging the hours towards the required quantity of hours for that competency. Where can I find a template? I want to really quick, before we actually look at finding a template, I would like to show you what one of these templates actually looks like. Just because, I've talked about them so much, and I think it would be worthwhile to check out. First, what I'm going to show you here is an Appendix A, and this is actually a hybrid-based format. And this is for a sprinkler technician program. And so as we'll see here, we have the job title, And it's worth noting here, what we see in parentheses here, this is the official onetonline.org U.S. Department of Labor occupation title, is pipe fitter, sprinkler fitter. And then what we can see here, outside of the parentheses, sprinkler technician is what it's actually called by the employer. And so we can see that they differ from each other, but they mean the same thing. We have full ability to customize that. We see the ONET code that helps us identify what the occupation is in that system. And we see the RAPIDS code. And if you're a specialist or you're working with businesses to register a program, this number is hugely important because when we submit the program to DOL, it's this number we input into their system to let them know which template we're going to be drawing upon. Here we see the estimated program length for this apprenticeship, and this is a longer one. This is about 5,000 to 6,500 hours. Roughly speaking, 1 year of full-time employment is going to be around 2,000 hours. So this is looking at somewhere between 2.5 to 3-ish years of a program length. And we can see that it gives us an option for, is the program competency-based, time-based, or hybrid? This one is hybrid. And so we'll see here it has the hour ranges for about how many hours they need to spend in that activity. And we can see here again, this is kind of the category of competency. We have coordinate repair of sprinkler systems, and that's broken down further into individual bullet point or tasks of communicate repair needs, work with necessary trades, shopping contractors, and be familiar with various code requirements. So that is what one of these documents actually looks like. And I think what's really crucial here is to know that the sponsor has, or the employer, when you're working with a business to develop a program, has full ability to customize what these documents look like. They can change around the competencies, they can change around the headers, they can change the occupation title. Now, the general rule of thumb is that you can change up to 25% of one of these documents and still stay within DOL's restrictions for how much you're able to customize. There's nobody at US DOL who is going through and counting the characters you've edited to say, okay, you hit 26%, that's going to be a no-go. What I usually say is it's more of like a squint test. So if your US DOL rep can squint at the document and it looks roughly like the occupation of the original template, you're going to be good to go. But if you made a carpenter into an EMS or an EMT, they're probably not going to get through with that. The next resource I want to show you and walk you through is ONET Online. This is a hugely important resource for not real time, but labor market information that we can utilize in business outreach and program development. It's onetonline.org. And what this allows us to do is look up really great occupational information for any role that we're going to be working with an employer, a business, a career seeker on. And so what I'm going to do here to provide an example, you can sort through the occupations on this site a number of ways. Obviously, you can look them up directly. Someone in the chat saying they cannot hear. I'm not sure if that's on my end.
That might be, yeah. I'll reach out.
Thank you so much. So we can see I am going to pull up here for our purposes. We are going to utilize manufacturing. Obviously, a lot of the employers we work with, the businesses we work with, are manufacturing businesses. And it's going to give us a lot of information right away, even just on this landing page. And we'll see the titles here. I'm going to click on one that I know for certain is apprenticeable. And I'm going to click on machinists. And so if we go to machinists, it's going to give us a lot of information here on this landing page. It's going to give us a blurb of like, okay, what is this job? Which for those of us who work in workforce development, maybe for a long time, and we've not worked in manufacturing or construction, and we're like, okay, what is this job? Always good to just read these blurbs so you don't sound silly talking to the employer. When you're like, oh yeah, the machinists, they operate the machinery, that's for sure. In addition to those blurbs, there's also a number of alternative job titles that have been reported for this position. And these become hugely important because when we're looking for apprenticeship templates, we can search up any of these titles to find templates that correspond to this occupation. In addition to those optional titles, we have a lot of competencies or tasks. Again, this looks very similar to the apprenticeship templates you might note. They have a number of other pieces of information, the technology skills, the work activities, the work contexts. Great for us in terms of program building. We talk about the first C is competencies, the second C is coursework. We can utilize this component here to actually search up training provider options for this occupation in our area. We can also search up the state licensing requirements as well as any national certifications that may be available. Right below that, and this is really important for us, we'll see these are all variations of this occupation that have already been registered with the U.S. Department of Labor. So these are, for each one of these 10 options, there is an employer who already has registered a program, and they've made their own little changes to that template, right? This one is for a rocket motor mechanic. This one is for an instrument maker or instrument maker and repairer. And all of those are going to be slightly different from one another. They may share a lot of overlapping competencies, but again, they've been customized to fit the needs of that specific role. So if I am working with a business that is in need of an automotive machinist, I already have that done and ready for me. And even if I don't, I know that I've got a basic one to work off of that we'll see in a little bit. In addition to that great information, we can also look up the wage information for this occupation, and we can do so down to the specific area code. I'm going to use the area code for Charleston, Illinois, and East Central Illinois, where I worked as an apprenticeship specialist. Oh, I'm sorry, that's actually my current. You never get Mondays. All right. Here we have for Charleston, Illinois. We can see it on an annual wage basis, or we can actually sort by hourly, which is generally going to be more useful for us. And so we can see that the cost of living in East Central Illinois is lower than both the country and Illinois on whole on average. And so when we come to that third C, that component of compensation, this is really important information to us because sometimes an employer will just ask you in the meeting, like, okay, like what should I be expecting for this to pay for the individuals who go through this program? They know they're incurring the cost of the coursework that they're going to be paying for, as well as the cost of just onboarding someone. They get down to brass tacks. They want to know, what is this employee actually going to cost me in terms of their hourly wages? And so this is a really great means of kind of advising them just with numbers alone, right? You don't have to tell them, hey, you're a really bad employer if you're going to pay them $17 an hour. Don't say that. But what you can say is, well, I want to note that for our area, the median or average wage for this position is around $22 an hour. So if we set $18 an hour as the ending wage for your program, it's probably going to be difficult to not lose those individuals to another employer. And so this is great information for us to have. This is great information for employers to have. And again, in many instances, you can get that data down to your local area. A lot of times downstates, employers are, oh, we don't pay as much as in Chicago. And that's true. But we do know what is paid there. So we always have that information on hand. So that is a lot of the great information available here on ONET. Now, what you'll notice is here on ONET alone, we have looked at competencies, we have looked at a means of identifying coursework, and we have looked at around what the average compensation for that role is. Now, all of this information we were able to identify without ever being in the room with a manufacturer. So what that means is if I'm going to meet with a manufacturer in my community, a manufacturing business, manufacturing employer, and I know based on either job postings I've seen on their website or communication that I received in the referral that they're looking for a machinist, I am going to be able to walk into that meeting with apprenticeship template for the machinist position. We'll see how we find those in just a second. A list of available training providers and options in their area. And I go the full, I get cost estimates, I get scheduling options as well. So they've got a menu of options of templates, a menu of options of potential coursework providers, and data in hand about what is the average wage for this position to help them stay competitive. So that's all three of our C's before we've even sat down with the employer. And when we're receiving referrals, Obviously, if we're meeting with a business for the first time completely cold, we're not going to spend the whole time talking. We're going to listen to what their pain points are and determine whether or not apprenticeship is the best solution for them. But when you've received, well, let's call them a slam dunk referral from somebody where, hey, this employer wants information on apprenticeships, this is when you can really shine by saying, hey, just so you know, I'm here to help you do all of the paperwork for this process, and I've got pretty much all of it in this folder right here. So if you could just go through this with me and make some edits, we could get this program submitted today. And you could. Now, you're probably not going to, unless you're meeting with the head of HR and they say, perfect, sign off on it, let's get it done. Most of the time, it's going to take more than one meeting. Every specialist in the chat going, yeah, tried seven. But still, we can, on our end, do everything we can to expedite that process by coming in prepared. And these templates and the data here on ONET are a huge part of that. Now, the next thing I want to do is get to the actual topic of today's session, which is finding a set of apprenticeship standards. And the best place, but not the only place to do that, is going to be here on apprenticeship.gov. When we come to apprenticeship.gov, you'll see here up at the top, we have drop downs for career seekers, employers, educators, resources, about us. If we click on employers, we can see Occupation Finder. If we click on educators, we can find Occupation Finder. If we click on resources, we can find Occupation Finder. So 3 of the 6 buttons, you're looking for these words, Occupation Finder, and that will take us to this page. And you'll notice that it looks very similar to ONET. Similar to ONET, we can search based by sector, by industry. And when we do, this is what it looks like. We'll see it gives us a very similar list to ONET, and for each one that has one of these stars next to it, that's going to indicate to us that there is an apprenticeship already registered for that occupation. There's over 1,300 occupations already registered as being apprenticeable. If we check this box right here, we can even only show those. That makes it even easier. Change that to 100. And so any of the occupations you're seeing as I'm scrolling here, we could develop a program for any of these with an employer, and most of the work's already done for them. And here we have machinists. And you'll see, just like on ONET, we can see all of these alternative titles, and I could have typed in any of these into the search bar up here. I could have typed CNC machinist, I could have typed fixture maker, and it would have brought us to this page. So you don't feel like you have to know the exact terminology. Feel free to use whatever the position title name that the employer is, because a lot of times HR departments like to get creative, right? They don't just want to call them a machinist. No, no, no. We can't just call them a machinist. We have to call them machinist specialist 1. Okay, fine. You can play that game. You're probably still going to get where you need to go because it is a really well-developed search engine here for finding these templates. You'll note that all of the different options we saw on ONET are also listed here. I'll look here on Instrument Maker. We click to expand. Boom, it gives us the RAPIDS code. Remember, that's an important number for our registering the program. And it's going to give me 3 different options for 3 different variations of the template that I can download. It gives me a time-based option, a competency-based option, and a hybrid option. Remember, in a time-based program, they're working towards a number of hours. In a competency-based program, their mentor is evaluating their skill as they progress. And a hybrid, it's a little bit of both. And it primarily has to do with how do they earn their wage increases as they move through the program. So it can be that easy, right? Maybe we know exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for machinist. We search machinist. We're good to go, right? But it's not always going to be that easy. I want to give you one example of a time when I had to get creative, because sometimes we've got to get creative when we're working within this system. I was working with the Illinois Pork Producers Association several months back, and they wanted to develop a program for all of their member farmers throughout the state to be able to register with their program. They were looking for a swine tender, swine herder position. So, okay. First thing we'll do is we will jump to agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting. And so we'll see here. Okay, great. We have farm workers, farm, ranch, and aquacultural animals. We'll click on that. We see the occupations: cowboy, farmhand, herdsman, livestock handler. But what's this? When we go to see what templates exist, the only one that exists currently is for fish hatchery worker. Okay, well, I wonder what that looks like. I actually know exactly what it looks like, and I'll show it to you right now. What we can see when we actually look here is that all of the competencies here are very general. They have very little to do with working in a fish hatchery. They are much more generalist and related to what's associated with the ONET code. Remember, the ONET code is not for fish hatchery worker. The ONET code is just for farm agricultural worker. And so when I was working with the Illinois Pork Producers Association, this is the template we used to register their program. How did we do that? Well, remember, we can change this title. It does not matter what's in this box here. It matters what's in this one. And so that is to say, if I had gone looking and there had been no swine handler, I could have said, I'm sorry, Illinois pork producers, there's not, that occupation's just not registered right now. I guess we're going to have to go through the lengthy years-long process of getting this occupation added with the U.S. Department of Labor. But we didn't have to do that. All we had to do was change this title. And so I say that to tell you that one of the reasons I like to start on ONET is that this is the code that we're going to be developing a program based on. And we're very fortunate in that we have a good degree of flexibility because a lot of ONET codes have some flexibility baked in. They're kind of like generalist, like it'll be like, or it'll be like manufacturing, all other roles. Sometimes one of those gets through. That's great for us because that means we have a whole lot of flexibility with what we can plug in there. That's one way we can identify apprenticeship standards that already exist. I'm going to take us to another location we can identify those programs. This is apprenticeshipstandards.org. This is put out by the Urban Institute as a resource for finding apprenticeship standards. Now, what's worth noting here is that this website pulls not only from programs that are registered with the U.S. Department of Labor I'll back up. There are two kinds of states and territories in the United States when it comes to registered apprenticeship. There are OA states, of which Illinois is one. That means our programs are directly regulated by and registered with the federal U.S. Department of Labor. They have representatives in our state, our apprenticeship and training representatives, who we work closely with. But Illinois itself does not regulate apprenticeship programs. That's not the case in every state. There are other states called SAA, or State Apprenticeship Agency states. Those states still do some reporting to USDOL, obviously, but they themselves regulate what occupations are apprenticeable and the actual programs themselves. And so when we search here on apprenticeshipstandards.org, it's going to show us templates from states that are just like Illinois, where their standards are through USDOL, and we can use those, no problem. It's also going to show us templates for SAA states. We may not be able to use those because those may be a set of standards that haven't actually been approved by USDOL, but rather by whichever state they were registered in. Now, does that mean we cannot do anything with those? No, a lot of the times they may be great to copy and paste into one that is approved. You can copy their competencies all you want. That's easy as pie. This may also show you standards for programs that are unregistered. And so similarly here, if we wanted to look up machinist, and right off the bat, we can see it's given us some results for North Carolina. Again, we may have some utility for these. No problem in borrowing from those, but we cannot use them directly in the same way that we could if we were pulling from the USDOL site directly. Now, here is from Colorado. I think Colorado is no longer an OA state, but I think when they were, they registered this set of standards. And so look, we download a working copy of these standards, and they have redacted the employer information, personal information on there, and left us with all of those competencies that we can use to help develop our program. That is kind of the second way we can identify standards if we are having a hard time using ONET and apprenticeship.gov. That's just one more means we have of accessing that information. Now, there's the one last way we can identify standards for our program is that there are a number of larger national industry associations who, as a benefit to their members, have begun offering apprenticeship programs of some kind. The National Association of Landscape Professionals is one such industry association, and they have registered a set of standards for their members to utilize. I'm actually going to show you their template itself. And again, this is really more of a resource than anything else, but just know that this information is out there for you to borrow on if you were working with, for instance, a landscape professionals company on developing a program of some kind. This is their whole set of standards. We're going to scroll. Appendix A, work process schedule, parentheses, apprenticeship template. And we can see here what theirs looks like. It's very simple. It's very clean. It's got all of their tasks. It's got hours. This is a time-based program we can see. And so we could copy and paste these directly into a document if we are working with a landscape employer and developing a program with them. So those are primarily the three means by which we can identify existing templates when we're working with an employer. I've talked for a lot of this, and I do want this to kind of be interactive. So what I'd like to do now is feel free in the chat to drop an occupation, either for an employer you're currently working with, or maybe you're trying to work with and had a hard time. And we're going to try in real time find some standards for the occupations you suggest in the chat. Oh, that's a great question, Jen. Thank you for asking that. So let's say I'm not super up to date on the terminology for an industry or occupation I'm working with. I'm 27. I'm getting up there. But let's say I was trying to work with an airline for a flight attendant position, but I don't know the phrase flight attendant. I think, oh, I'm looking for stewardess. I can type in stewardess, and it will bring me to flight attendants. Oddly enough, okay, this says is not approved. It actually is. This is a fun, what's it called? Exercise for us here. And so another thing we can do is we can look in this related occupations set right here. Get passenger attendants. You can get bus drivers. Get railroad conductors and engineers. Beautician, another good one. That's another perhaps older job title for a cosmetologist. And we can see right here that even though we put it in an older term, it still pulls up because it's got these alternative occupation titles. It's Stephen Lefevre asked about a glazier. We will absolutely look that up for you. Yeah, and so we can see right away it immediately pulls them up for us. We even have a couple of variations. We have a standard. We have this one looks like it's been hybridized, but we also have architectural as well as stained glass. And so those are all templates that already exist for us. And even without downloading these standards, we'll see here that it actually gives us an overview of the competencies for this role. So before you even go to download, if you want, you can scroll down and just kind of scroll through And sometimes if I'm meeting virtually with an employer, I'll do literally what we're doing right now. We will just go through and say, okay, does this look good? Does this look close? And if so, then we know we've got that first C of competencies. And a lot of this may seem very simple, but again, this is the core of your apprenticeship program. This is the central component of what we need to register a program with the U.S. Department of Labor. If we've got one of these silly little Word docs and we've got a list of courses and we've got two numbers, remember, a progressive wage schedule, the compensation component of a registered apprenticeship program standards can be as simple as two numbers. It can be they start at $17 an hour, they end at $19 an hour. It really can, now obviously we're going to recommend that they build in a few more rungs on that ladder, but it really can all be that simple from a paperwork standpoint. And again, when we're working with businesses, they are so concerned about the bureaucracy, the red tape of what participating in a registered apprenticeship is going to do for them. And by showing them right off the bat, this is just a Word doc with a list of skills you want your apprentice to have. This is just a template that we can borrow upon to help us expedite this process, get your program registered faster. We can really help combat that uneasiness on their part and also move their program forward faster because we know that so many programs die when they lose momentum. And that happens around this time of year all the time, right? I emailed with this guy October, November, December. We come back from the holiday, they ghost you. It happens. We can try to avoid that by keeping momentum moving. And one of the things we can do to keep that momentum moving is identifying these templates on as early as we can so that we can start building that program out immediately. Okay, I want to open it up to questions or if anybody else has any occupations they want to throw out.
So Nate, I wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
It sounds like a big jump from fish hatchery person to pork person. Um, and also that you had to have a lot of critical thinking and be curious. So you can't just like do a quick search and then give up, it sounds like. So how long did it take you before you went back to the pork producers when you defined the template to get it ready? What all did you, what was the whole process?
Great question. So on the call with the pork producers, I was incredibly certain that there would be a farm worker position. I wasn't even worried about it. I was like, well, certainly I'll have a template sent over to you in just a few minutes. Pulled up apprenticeship.gov. Uh-oh, I'm not seeing one. Then I saw the fish hatchery worker. And my immediate thought was, okay, I hope we can make this work because most of the time we can. We have enough flexibility with customizing those competencies that we can massage things to get them where they need to be. I opened the document and literally there was not a single competency that was related to it being a fish hatchery. It was all about agriculture. It was all the skills that Illinois pork producers had shared with me. Now, if I had at a glance just said, okay, that's not possibly going to work, that's completely out of left field, like I said, we would have been stuck. We wouldn't have necessarily had a template to move forward with. And that just goes to show it's worth checking. And even though the competencies were so aligned with the role, even after we submitted, I got a call that day from our apprenticeship and training representative, Bruce Hallam, who serves most of central and southern Illinois. And he called me up and he's, what's with this fish worker for the pork producers? And I was like, oh, well, no, Bruce, if you actually look at the ONET code, you'll see it corresponds to agricultural worker and all of the competencies do as well. And he said, okay. So it really can't be that easy. That said, it did get an eyebrow raise. But as I mentioned earlier, so long as you are not fundamentally changing the competencies themselves, it doesn't matter if you do some wordsmithing, it doesn't matter if you change the occupational title. So there is an element of kind of creative thinking, of problem solving that goes into this because you're not always going to find a template that fits perfect right off the bat or seems like it would be a good fit right off the bat. But there is one out there. I'll give you another example of this, also involving working with Bruce. I was working with an employer in central Illinois who did right-of-way services for pipelines. That's where they do, the trimming and mowing and maintenance around oil pipelines. Because, you just want to take a, hedge trimmer or a lawnmower and run over a pipeline with it. So it's a skilled expertise. And we were having a hard time because we weren't able to find the exact set of standards. And I asked Bruce Hallam, and he immediately said botanist. And I thought, what? But then we looked at the competencies for or I'm sorry, yeah, it was or arborist for the arborist occupation, and they were all of the things we were looking for because it was trim vegetation, it was utilize equipment in a specialized manner, it was all of the things they were looking for this right-of-way company, even though the titles seem to have nothing to do with one another. And so that's another great point is that if you're having a hard time identifying a template, your ATRs, especially if you're working with Bruce Hallam or Meredith Thetford, the folks who've really been doing it for a long time, they will know some of those tips and tricks as well. And, I taught Bruce how to find fish hatchery worker for farm programs. So it's an information exchange. Hannah asks, how do you normally go about working with unique companies and organizations that are not as prominent? I guess, Hannah, do you mean like unique occupations or? Okay, so can you give me an example of an occupation that you would consider to be like super unique? Because I'll tell you that not a, okay, golf course attendant. Okay, see, now we're having fun. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this up. And I'll be honest with you, Hannah, I don't know if we have one, but I highly suspect we'll be able to find something that works. We have golf course mechanic, golf course laborer, golf course maintenance worker. And immediately we can see that for golf course maintenance worker, we actually have 4 options that already exist. We've got landscape technician, greenskeeper 2. We can see there they added their Roman numeral 2 to make it special. We've got landscape management tech, and we've got landscape gardener. And again, those are associated with this ONET code, which is for landscaping and groundskeeping workers. So even though it's specialized, even though it's a little more specific, it's for a golf course, we were able to identify it within this broader ONET code. Great question. Thanks so much. Now, you said golf course attendant. I don't know what an attendant would do necessarily. We also see golf course starter. It's looking like this is not currently approved. But I have to imagine if we really dug down on some of the specific skills they're looking for, we may be able to find something that would work. For instance, we see here that like dining room and cafeteria attendants and bar helpers, that's more of a chef. But if they were doing a lot of like maintenance tasks, the other thing here I'll say is with something like a golf course attendant, that may not be an occupation that would necessarily be a good fit for registered apprenticeship. If it sounds like it's kind of an entry level, you know, hospitality role, we may not be looking to develop necessarily an apprenticeship program for that kind of entry level role. But that's still a great example.
Can I ask you again about the pork producers, just going back?
Sure.
So, you listened to what their needs were. What's your process? You listened to it, then you went and found the templates. Did you change the template before you met with them again? What's your process before meeting with them again?
Sure. So the first thing I did when I worked with Illinois pork producers is we always ask, what is the role you are looking to develop talent for? And in their case, they weren't going to be hiring directly, right? They wanted something that would be usable by any of their member farms, whether they were a huge farm, a family-owned farm. They wanted it to have a practical utility for them to say, we need somebody who can work with the pigs, clean up, do the breeding procedures, do the euthanization procedures. That was a part of it. I didn't expect to learn a lot about putting pigs down, but it was a component. And what she did was she sent me a job description. And this is a great place to start. If you can get a job description from the businesses or the employers you're working with, what I can do is I'll just pull the job description up in a window on the left side of my screen and get the list of competencies on Own It on the right side of the screen and start seeing, hey, do these look the same? Do they look to be around in the same wheelhouse? And so that's what I was able to do. Now, I'll be quite honest with you. The job competencies for the pork producer role were simple enough that I could understand them without going into them on an in-depth level. Now, for something a little more technical, I may not have known all the lingo. It might not have been as easy for me to identify, hey, these are going to be a good one-to-one match. So it's always good. Rely on your own expertise as long as you're able, but also in the interest of not looking silly in front of the business, sometimes I have to ask them. I'll send them 2 or 3 of these templates and say, please look these over. Let me know if any of these look right for the role as you're envisioning it with your organization. And so either I can narrow it down or I'll ask the business and rely on their expertise to help narrow it down.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I know we're at about 50 minutes, so if there's no other questions, I want to show a few additional resources that our team has just released, and then maybe we'll all get 5 minutes back today. How about that? How about it? Everybody's thinking, oh, what am I going to do with all this time off? Take a vacation. So, immediately here are 2 print resources that were just released on apprenticeshipillinois.com. If you're one of our apprenticeship specialists or apprenticeship intermediaries, you should have received an email from your grant manager with links to these as well. On the left here, we have our Apprenticeship Illinois program sponsor guide. Being the sponsor or legally responsible entity for a registered apprenticeship program is not a huge lift for many employers, but it is not without responsibilities. And so whether you are an LWIA looking to sponsor programs on behalf of businesses for the first time, a community college who normally sponsors programs, or you're working with a business for the first time where they want to be their own sponsor and they need to know what that entails, this is a great resource that lays out what is required of employers, what information are they expected to have on hand for the apprentices in their program, how can they make sure they're doing their due diligence in the upkeep of their program. On the right here, we have our standards builder checklist. Today, we talked through our 3 C's of competencies, coursework, and compensation. This breaks those down into a little bit more detailed components of what is needed to submit a program in the DOL standards builder platform. If you are a specialist and you are submitting programs for the first time or the 30th time, it is a great resource to have on hand. The last thing you want to do is tell the employer, yep, we're set to go. I'm submitting it today. And then you log in and you're like, oh, I never got their hiring requirements. So definitely a good thing to print out, pin to the cube, as it were, and keep that on hand as a reference. In addition to those, we also have a number of other resources, great coming down the line. We've got some Mythbusters, we've got some case studies. I'm actually going to be putting together some one-pagers for the manufacturing and healthcare sectors that have a bunch of these templates hyperlinked in them for easy access. To even reduce the steps for you further. That's what we're doing here at Apprenticeship Illinois, making it as easy as possible for employers, for businesses, for our workforce professionals. All of these resources coming down the pipe. We're also getting additional guidance from DCEO on supporting registered apprenticeship and work-based learning with WIOA dollars. So expect resources on that sometimes this spring as well. We're super excited for everything we've got coming on the way for you. If you are an Apprenticeship Illinois grantee, I remind you that our quarterly reports are going to be due on January 30th. Regardless of whether or not you are an Apprenticeship Illinois grantee or a business or an employer or a workforce partner or an educator, I want to let you know that we have open technical assistance office hours every week, Mondays and Wednesdays, 10 to 2, or anytime that works for you. My calendar is your calendar. I am here to answer any questions you may have about registered apprenticeship programs, their development, their expansion, the day-to-day, the funding. I'm here to help. A lot of folks will come to me after they've met with an employer and say, okay, they asked me this and I don't know the answer. Let's run through this. Sometimes folks will have me meet with them, with the employer, either for the first consultation if they're newer to registered apprenticeship, or they'll have me on hand to answer any questions they might not know the answers to. I've looked for work process schedules, these apprenticeship templates with folks before. I've looked for training providers, really anything we can do to help expedite that process for you or a business you're working with. I am here to help. In addition to that office hour resource that's available to everybody, for our Apprenticeship Illinois grantees, there are open office hours for reporting available through D. Reinhardt at the link in this slide, which will be sent out to you. Those are going to be weekly Wednesdays from 10 to 11. There's also a monthly 1 hour call where they'll run down any of the updates made to the platform, any upcoming changes or bugs they've already identified. Please utilize those resources as well if they apply to you. And so with that, I am going to say thank you so much for your time today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, ncarlson@niu.edu. Again, these slides will be sent out to you after the fact. We appreciate your time today. We hope to see you in 2 weeks for our next webinar, which will be the first in our CoLab for Success series. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks, everyone.